Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call to order this November 18th, 2024 meeting of the Town of Kiowa Island Board of Zoning Appeals. I'm Frank Cassidy, the board chair. In addition to myself, members hearing the case today are Ben Farabee, Morris Hannon, Lynn O'Leary, and virtually up at the top there are Phil Adams, Larry Rosenfeld, and Jay Lewis. And staff here today are John Taylor, our planning director, Dan Vincent from our planning staff, and Chloe Satzker, our attorney. Our case rulings from this and any BZA meeting are available for public review and inspection during normal business hours at the town hall. Since our meeting is being conducted virtually via Zoom, please be reminded that in order to obtain a clean and clear record for persons listening live, it's important that all participants not speak over one another. If you'd like to speak, please raise your hand. I'll recognize you and you can come to the mic. At this time, I'd like to explain to the public the workings of the BZA. The Board of Zoning Appeals is a quasi-judicial body established to interpret and grant relief from the zoning ordinance. The board has jurisdiction over three types of cases: appeals, variances, and special exceptions. Appeals are heard regarding administrative actions or decisions by the zoning administrator or staff. Variances may be granted when strict application of the zoning ordinance would cause an unnecessary hardship. This board's actions must be based on specific standards as contained in SC Local Government Planning Enabling Act of 1994 and the Town of Kiowa Island zoning ordinance. Special exceptions allow the board to permit uses if certain conditions as contained in the zoning ordinance are met. A simple majority vote of the quorum present, today that happens to be the entire board, is required to grant a variance or to overturn a decision of the zoning administrator in an appeal or to grant a special exception. Because today's hearing is a public fact-finding meeting, we are in compliance with the Freedom of Information Act and SC Code 6-29-70. 15 days prior to this hearing, an announcement was printed in the Post and Courier, a sign was posted on or near the designated property, and a notice was mailed to the applicant or representative and to residents within 500 feet of the application and to parties of interest. Persons, organizations, and the news media that have requested a declaration of our meeting have also been notified. The Freedom of Information Act does not require notification of anyone other than the applicant and parties of interest. Our purpose today is for interested parties to be heard in order to assist the board in gathering evidence pertinent to the case. If the members of the BZA feel the need for additional information to clarify a case, the board has the authority to subpoena witnesses. In addition to testimony, our board has been presented written information submitted to the staff by the applicant or their agent for each case. This information is now considered to be evidence and is entered into the permanent record of this body. It's assumed that it is complete, true, and accurate. Also, we have been presented data assembled by the staff for the purpose of clarifying the location and effect on surrounding property. Our board is empowered to approve with conditions, or deny the request. In granting a variance, the Board of Zoning Appeals may attach to it such conditions regarding location, character, or other features of the proposed building, structure, or use as the board may consider advisable to protect established property values in the surrounding area or to promote the public health, safety, or general welfare. We are also authorized to defer a case should there be a need to obtain additional information. If an applicant's request is approved for a special exception, variance, or appeal of a decision by the zoning administrator, they must go to the Town of Kiowa Island to apply for permits. Variances and special exceptions granted by the BZA are valid for 12 months after this meeting. However, if an applicant's request is disapproved and they wish to appeal the decision of this board concerning the case, appeals must be addressed in the circuit court. SC Code 6-29-820 states that the appeal must be filed by the applicant within 30 days after the decision of the board is mailed to them. Failure to file an appeal within the time limit deprives the court of the jurisdiction to hear this matter. For each case, staff will present information, the applicant will present their case, and we'll hear from others, if any, who wish to speak. Be reminded to direct your comments to the board, not to the applicant or other speakers. To expedite the meeting, I'd ask all persons who intend to speak today to stand, and Ms. Satzker will administer the oath.
Raise your right hand. Do you promise that the testimony you're about to give today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Thank you, Chloe. I'll now call case BZA 24-000020 at 161 High Dunes Lane. First, we'll hear from staff, then the applicant, then others. All speakers should come to the podium, state your name and current address for the record before presenting testimony. I'll limit public comments to 3 minutes, and the applicant will have a chance for rebuttal if necessary. Dan, you're presenting this case?
Sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Thank you for your attendance today. We will have one case on our agenda. That case is BZA 24-000020. The applicant and property owner, Devin and Heather Anderson, being represented by Mackenzie Conlon of Vignette Architecture, is requesting a variance for the reduction of the required 20-foot side setback for approximately 40 square feet for a proposed residence. The TMS number for the subject property is 265-16-00078. The lot size is approximately 29,978 square feet in size, of which 21,699 is Highlands, and the remainder, 8,279, is Marshlands. The required setbacks, according to the Town of Kiawah Island's Land Use Planning and Zoning Ordinance, are in Section 1266 in the R2 category, which requires a 25-foot front yard setback, a 20-foot side yard setback, and a 25-foot rear setback. The subject property is subject to a maximum lot coverage of 33%. Here's a zoning aerial of the subject property. The subject property is in the R2 zoning district. Adjacent properties to the south, east, and west across High Dunes are also located in the R2 zoning district. Here's a GIS aerial of the property. The subject property is currently undeveloped and sits adjacent to the critical area to the north. The adjacent property to the west is also undeveloped. Another aerial view of the subject property. Staff took a site visit on November 1st of 2024, where staff put up a sign of the variance. Staff has not received any written public comments from this case. Here are a few site pictures from the November 1st visit. The applicant's proposed plans include a new single-family home with an attached garage. The proposed attached garage encroaches into the side setback by approximately 4 feet 9 inches. The distance from the proposed garage to the property line is approximately 15 feet 3 inches. And the total amount of encroachment into the side setback is approximately 40 square feet. Few renderings. The BZA may grant a variance only if exceptional circumstances exist and an unnecessary hardship is so substantial, serious, and compelling that relaxation of the general restrictions ought to be granted. No variance shall be granted unless the applicant shall show, and the BZA shall find that this variance meets the following criteria. That criteria, we'll start with A. There are extraordinary and exceptional conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property. There may be extraordinary and exceptional conditions to the property. The large grand oak in the front yard restricts the buildable area. Per the applicant's letter of intent, quote, there is a significant 36-inch oak tree located within the buildable area, which we're attempting to preserve. We've included an arborist report in our submittal package, which indicates the 36-inch oak tree is in good condition and should be preserved, end quote. Criteria B, these conditions do not generally apply to other properties in the vicinity. These conditions may be unique to the subject property and may not generally apply to other properties in the vicinity. The property is located in the R2 residential zoning district. Adjacent properties along High Dunes are also located in the R2 residential zoning district. This lot sits adjacent to a critical area line to the north. Existing structures in the vicinity may or may not have similar encroachments based on the current setback standards. Per the applicant's letter of intent, quote, while the setbacks may be consistent from lot to lot, the buildable square footage is different, and it's reduced by the impact of preserving the 36-inch oak tree. Criteria C, because of these conditions, the application of this ordinance to the particular piece of property would effectively prohibit or unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property. The application of this ordinance to the subject property may not prohibit or unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property. Per the applicant's letter of intent, quote, if the entire garage was designed within the buildable area, the back out space would encroach into the tree, causing the tree to likely need to be removed, end quote. Criteria D, the authorization of a variance will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent properties or to the public good, and the character of the zoning district will not be harmed by the granting of this variance. The authorization of this variance may not be of substantial detriment to the adjacent properties or the public good. The proposed encroachment is minimal. Per the applicant's letter of intent, quote, existing property is vegetated and screened from adjacent properties. The proposed garage would be located 15 feet 3 1/4 inch from the property line, less than a 5-foot request, which equates to approximately 40 square feet or 0.18% of the Highland area. There's currently no house designed on the neighboring lot on the same side of the proposed variance request. End quote. Criteria E, Board of Zoning Appeals shall not grant a variance, the effect of which would be to allow the establishment of a use not otherwise permitted in a zoning district, to extend physically a nonconforming use of land, or to change the zoning district boundaries shown on the official zoning map. Granting of this variance would not allow the establishment of a use not otherwise permitted in the zoning district, extend physically a non-conforming use of land, or change the zoning district boundaries. The property is currently undeveloped. Per the applicant's letter of intent, quote, variance approvals would not change the permitted use of the property, end quote. Criteria F, the fact the property may be utilized more profitably should a variance be granted may not be considered grounds for a variance. The BZA may not consider profitability when considering this variance request. Per the applicant's letter of intent, quote, variance approval would not change the value of the property. Criteria G, the need for the variance shall not be the result of the applicant's own actions. The need for the variance may be the result of the applicant's own actions. The subject property is currently undeveloped. Per the applicant's letter of intent, quote, there has been no work done on the existing lot. Criteria H, granting the variance will not be contrary to the public or neighborhood interest, nor will adversely affect other properties in the vicinity, nor interfere with the harmony, spirit, intent, or purposes of these regulations. Granting of this variance may not be contrary to the public or neighborhood interest, may not adversely affect other properties in the vicinity, nor interfere with the harmony, spirit, intent, and purposes of these regulations. Per the applicant's letter of intent, quote, granting of this variance would not be contrary to the public or the neighborhood, nor will it affect other properties in the vicinity, nor interfere with the harmony, spirit, intent, and purposes of these regulations. Proposed design of the variance still fits within the spirit and intent of the overall neighborhood. And criteria I, granting of this variance does not substantially conflict with the comprehensive plan or the purposes of this ordinance. Granting of this variance may not substantially conflict with the comprehensive plans or the purposes of this ordinance. The Board of Zoning Appeals may approve with conditions, or deny case number BZA 24-000020. And again, this is a variance request for the reduction of the required 20-foot side setback for approximately 40 square feet for the proposed single-family residence.
Thank you, Dan. Questions from the board for Dan?
I have a question, Dan. Have you heard from the property owners on the east?
I have not.
What does the notification to them say?
It just lets them know that their neighbor is requesting a variance for that 40 square foot encroachment into
But
the
it
side setback.
gives the dimensions of the extent of the request? The 40 square foot, the encroachment of 5 feet, that sort of thing?
It doesn't give them the full picture. If they do reach out to us, we do point them to the website where they're allowed to look at the materials. But in that package or in that notification, they're not informed of the details.
Other questions for Dan?
Yes. Frank, I have a question.
Yes, Larry.
In the letter from the BZA, from the Architectural Review Board, point 11 is change the designation from the area between the garage and the front steps from motor court and do motor court from guest parking. With such a designation, in the drawing that they have, I don't have a page number on it, it didn't print a page number with me, but they have two cars sketched backed up against the, near where the front steps are, not in the garage. And if that's the case, this is the picture I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's not to be guest parking, but is simply a motor court, which is an area, which I know of, is an area to maneuver a vehicle when you're moving in and out of a garage. On that basis, is there really a necessity to not, or is there no reason why they could not move the garage closer into that area? by 4.9 4 feet 9 inches, to make it, within the existing guidelines and not even require a variance? Or did anyone not even consider this option?
I'll defer to the applicant on this, but I believe it was because of this tree in the middle of the buildable area that is restricting their ability to add additional parking.
Would you point out where that tree is on the diagram, please?
That's it right there.
You see my cursor on there?
Yeah.
Could you go back to that slide for a minute, please? I may be wrong, but I don't see how that would intrude. If that's not to be a two-car parking area as they have in this picture, then I don't see the need for it. That's just my own personal opinion, but.
I'm sorry, Larry, would you say again, if you don't have that two-car parking area?
Yeah, it looks to me like there's more than enough room to maneuver if they move the garage 4 feet 9 inches closer into the, what they now want designated as a motor court. I don't think it'll cause any problems, and I don't think the tree will even come into play.
We'll let the applicant speak to that.
That's fine, thank you.
Other questions for Dan?
Yeah, do we know who owns the property adjacent on that side?
We do know, but give me a minute, I can get the owner.
All right, we'll let Dan take that under advisement, maybe while the applicant is speaking. Other questions? Okay, who'll be speaking for the applicant?
Good afternoon. My name is Bill Sense. I'm one of the principals at Vignette Architecture, 56 Broad Street, Charleston, South Carolina. Do you want me to address the gentleman's questions first?
However you'd like to do it is fine.
Okay. We have studied options of moving the garage, rotating it. There is a minimum backout space that is required from the garage and out, which is about 26 feet. And when we rotate it and account for that backout space, it pretty much takes the tree out of the equation. So the tree would be a lost cause at that point. What we're asking for is a very small pie shape of approximately 40 square feet to get us outside of that tree zone where we still will impede in it, but there's a 25% root zone that keeps the tree alive, and we're underneath that 25%. I think even one of our submittals shows the approximate encroachment of about 22 to 23%. So we're trying to be mindful of sticking within the health of the tree. Yeah, the 40 square feet, it's approximately 0.18% of the entire lot. It's very minimal. It would have no impact to the neighboring lots. If there wasn't a large grand oak tree in the middle of this lot, the design certainly would be different to account for us not being in that setback encroachment. But because of the tree and the amount we're trying to preserve while being minimal at the side yard setback, we found that this was the best case design where we're allowed to get our backout space. We're trying to account for the guest parking that is still a work in progress, but the overall submittal is reviewing the setback encroachment portion and trying to fit all these pieces in between a large grand oak and not requesting more than a 5 foot or even something even larger than that distance from the property line to our footprint.
Questions for the applicant?
Yeah, I have a couple. Is the angle of that garage element relative to the house, is that aesthetic as opposed to, say, you know, a right angle, a square angle? Is that aesthetic, or is that driven by some other consideration?
Good question. It's an aesthetic bonus for sure, but it's more of a functional solution that we're trying to improve here. We've looked at rotating it even more, but then it becomes a little bit, it would impede into the setback more. It becomes then more of a front-facing garage as well. We've looked at, like I said, trying to make it orthogonal to or parallel to the footprint, but then it brings it directly into that 36-inch trunk. So this angle that we're proposing is the best of both worlds, where we can functionally access the garage while trying to preserve the 36-inch tree.
Okay, thanks. And the other question, I mean, my concern frankly is for the protection of whoever that next door neighbor turns out to be. Because sooner or later it's going to be somebody. What is the sort of light and noise potential for the back side of that garage? I see it upstairs above the garage. It looks like there's some habitable space. So what's the light and noise potential coming from that habitable space toward the neighbor who's sort of the setback is designed to protect?
Yep. Kiowa ARB, they make us design windows on that back side of the space so that way headlights can't go through it. So light-wise, it's minimal. On the second floor.
Well, I mean, the headlights are from the garage downstairs. I'm sorry for the interruption. It looks like upstairs there's habitable space. Is that not right? That just from the elevation.
Correct. There will be a in-law suite up there. The roof structure itself is not larger than the main structure, so there will be either a gable or a dormer with minimal windows on that side of the house.
No outside porch or anything on that side.
No.
Other questions?
Have you looked at, sorry.
Sure, go
Have you
ahead.
looked at shrinking it down anywhere so it fits a little better on the lot?
Yes, we actually have. We try to keep the garage a certain distance or a certain dimension for its full functional use. Normally we wouldn't go lower than 22 feet. Ideally, the best garage dimensions are usually 24 feet, but I believe that we are around. I don't have that in front of me, but if you give me a second here.
I think it says you're at 26 feet.
Double check. Where do you see that?
There's a red line on where you have the triangle that's colored in red where you're looking for the variance. On that page, it says minimum backout space is 26. And then above it, you have a blue line that says you're at 28. So you're well within, you're well within that 25. So I'm just curious as to, of course, it's not mine to solve, as the guys always tell me, but.
All right, so the garage footprint though, that's what you were asking though?
Or any of the footprint, can you shrink the footprint of I guess I'm just asking, can it be shrunk so that you're still able to use it as functionally as you want to, but you don't need a variance, seeing how it hasn't been built yet?
I understand, okay. The 26 feet is the minimum backout space that the ARB mandates to.
Okay,
Okay,
but your blue
so-
line says you have 28 feet.
28 is to the outside of the retaining wall that will need to preserve that tree.
Okay.
That's what that represents. So the 26 represents the bare minimum. We might be able to shift it a little bit, but I think then it's not going to get as maybe 6 inches, if that. It's not a major difference.
Frank, one point.
I'm sorry?
I just have another question. I noticed that the point of the garage is at 30 feet from the setback, and you have 25 as allowable. Have you considered shifting the garage so it faces more towards the driveway? In other words, increasing the angle differentiation from the squareness of the house and moving it in slightly and having it come straighter down towards the driveway without having that additional curve, and it will possibly even bypass the angle where the tree doesn't even come into play again. Or am I not making myself clear?
I think I understand what you're asking. So you're suggesting
You
to,
have 5 feet, you have 5 feet closer, you can move the garage towards the street. If you move it 5 feet closer to the street, to the 25-foot line as opposed to the 30 line, and then advance it forward into what is referred to as the motor court area, is there any way to eliminate all or even some of the intrusion into the area?
I'll be honest with you, it's something that we didn't consider, nor did we think we would be approved for. We feel like that would have been a bigger ask. The 30 feet is an ARB guideline and setback. And so what we're trying to do is minimize the front.
Daniel stated at the beginning that the required setback is 25. The minimum is 25. So who takes precedence? The ruling or the ARB in this case?
I'd assume you would, but felt like it was a bigger hurdle to go through that direction than asking for 40 square feet off the side property.
Frank, any opinion on that?
No. I
Or the
don't
rest
think
of the
so.
board?
Dan, did you figure out who owns that piece of property?
Yeah, the owner of that property to the west is Paramount Investments LLC, which I assume is a holder until a property gets sold and then a house gets built on it.
But that's not the original developer. It's already been sold to somebody.
Correct.
I think so that person was informed about this.
Yes, they were sent a letter.
Yeah.
And then regarding the 30-foot and then the 25-foot, we do not enforce ARB's setbacks. Sometimes they're different than the towns. All we look at is the setbacks in our zoning code, which is that 25-foot.
And the applicant needs to pay attention to both, obviously.
Yeah, and if we were to go that path, there is a very large hill right there. Obviously, we would design around it, but putting it back where we have it takes advantage of its current natural topography, where if we had to bring it up 5 feet, rotate it, get it to fit, and so on, it's all doable, but you're cutting away a lot more natural features of the lot.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Your previous answer with regard to ARB kind of disturbing. Are you suggesting that you figure the route's easier to go with the BZA than it is with the ARB? Is that what you said?
No, I'm not suggesting one's easier than the other. It's definitely not that case. But what I am suggesting is that in the past, whenever we've designed something outside of those ARB standards, it usually gets denied.
Well, you do realize you got two hurdles to clear on both.
What-
as
I'm
you
sorry,
come-
what?
You have two hurdles to clear as you come through. You got the ARB as well as,
Yeah, and we do have ARB approval for the proposed design. They are in favor of this. I know that doesn't mean much, but there is support for it.
How does the ARB's asking you to designate the area of motor court and not get parking affect you in any way, shape, or form?
So they also need a ARB variance, I would assume, for that 20-foot
Yes.
side setback. So from my perspective, they've worked with the ARB in determining that instead of going into that front.
Other questions? All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I'd entertain any motions anyone would care to make.
Clarify a few things in returns to the retaining wall, would that be all right?
Please go to the mic, please, and state your name and business address.
Sure. Taylor Femmel, Remark Landscape Architecture. I'm a landscape architect. Is there a pointer? Sorry. And maybe, is it better if I draw on that?
I'm trying to do it.
Yeah, let me see if I can draw. Can you see the screen? Is it showing up on your end?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I just want to clarify that the distance from the garage to the back out space is we're showing that the 28 feet because we are required to build a retaining wall to preserve this tree because we cannot fill more than 12 inches over the root mass. So ultimately, that's what's guiding this 28 foot. To also clarify, if this was shifted this direction, we would have to lose these trees. So we're really working with the natural constraints of the lot.
Are these the trees, though, that Sammy was talking about, that some of those would have to be taken down?
They don't have to be, but the natural topography of high dunes is this whole block, a lot of it has that natural dune. So only one of them, here, let me Control Z. It's just this 10-inch that would be removed. We would like to retain the other ones. So we're just removing, we're keeping the live oak.
Anything else?
Nope, I just wanted to clarify.
Thank
Did
you
you have
very
any other
much.
questions?
Yeah,
That's helpful.
I'm sorry, there's a laurel oak that he's saying that's a 10-foot laurel oak needs to come down as well. Am I missing something totally wrong here?
Just on the so just
So they're calling that 10-inch oak there just a 10-inch oak? And
Yes.
then the other page, they're just calling it a laurel oak, so it's not two trees?
yes. So
Okay.
they're actually two different trees growing together, but the intent is also just to keep that natural topography because otherwise we'd have to cut it down.
Okay, but it also says here, the 12-inch live oak on the far side of the berm should be removed as the 10-inch laurel oak. So they're looking to take two trees down already, so,
It's this one, so it wouldn't affect the development, if that makes, sorry, hold on. Not these, we're trying to preserve as much as possible. It would just be this tree that's leaning. But if this was moved this direction, we would lose this berm altogether. So this would have to get cut down. I just wanted to clarify that.
How would you lose the entire berm by moving the garage 5 feet?
It's just the natural topography of the property, so I just wanted to clarify that.
so instead
I don't
of,
understand.
I guess, just because it's the natural topography, in order to make it so that you're living within the footprint of a lot that was purchased when you knew all these trees were there, we're not going to look at possibly doing that?
And Bill may want to come up to attest that, but if we move it this direction, we're
But
still.
not all that way. I'm just talking about 5 feet to the red line. the 25-foot
I
line.
understand. I just want to clarify that even if we shift it down, we're still encroaching into that zone. So,
Or if you turn it more diagonally, so that it faces more towards the street, as opposed to the direction it's facing now, you might be able to avoid that because you get a different spin on the 28 feet to a 26-foot minimum back out space.
There's a lot of moving factors. What we've designed was the best rotated angle for the garage for its function right now. If you're suggesting to move it up 5 feet, yeah, we could possibly rotate it again, but then you're still going to be rotating it more into the setback. This keeps it at a bare minimum for the back out space and the function of accessing the garage.
Anything else? Okay, I'd entertain a motion.
Frank, the applicant deserves an answer. I move that we agree to the variance.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? I guess my own view is, based on all the characteristics of this property, which I think that the two speakers have identified well, this is about the best we can do. So it seems like a good idea to me. Any other?
And Frank, I agree with that. I mean, my only concern ever in a case like this is for the interest of the property owner next door, who I understand got the legal notice, but that may or may not, is a practical matter, suffice. But I tend to agree that it's a minimal invasion, not as egregious as some I've seen by any stretch of the imagination.
Great. Any other discussion? All right, we'll take the vote then. In favor, Ben?
4.
Morris?
4.
Lynn?
No?
Larry?
No?
Phil?
Yes.
And Jay?
Yes.
And Frank, yes. So the vote is 5 in favor and 2 opposed. Motion carries. The variance is approved because of the extraordinary and exceptional conditions on this lot and the need to preserve particularly that 36-inch oak. With that, I think we're done with the cases today. Let me just ask John, do we have a December meeting?
Yes, we'll have 2 cases in December,
Okay.
and I'll check on that date, and I'll send you all an email about establishing a quorum.
Okay. Any other business? Okay, then we stand adjourned. Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving.